So then when you want to go back in that corner, you need to set it again with the calibrated swing.
Actually, we're just about to get there's a whole other process for going back to the default.
Okay, system.
Yeah. So there's two ways to get back to your default home position. There's only one way listed in your handout, that is to power cycle the machine. So to do that, it's the big black switch over here on the side. Wait for this front display to go completely dark, then power it up again. It's a pretty safe thing to do. All the power cycle the machine will do is reset the home position back to the default and clear any jobs out of the queue. Your table height is preserved so you don't lose your focus, and if you've had the dream coaches make any menu changes for you, those are also preserved. Which is a double-edged blade, of course, because then you forget to make them set it back at the end of your session and somebody comes in and is totally confused. Yes. Alright, so the other way to reset the home position back to the default, let's get a new home position, is not in your handout. It's a front panel method. Personally, I like it, so I don't have to reboot the machine all the time. But if you're going to use this method, write it down now. Does anybody need a pen?
Yes.
Okay, some pens out of my bag.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. An awful lot of stuff that you really don't want to do this time. So that's why I'm having you write it down. If you can't remember the keystrokes, just reboot the machine. Also, if you're going to Menlo Park, it's a different combination of buttons. Yay! That's the one functional difference between the Menlo Park lasers and these lasers. So here's San Jose, San Francisco, most of the tech shop locations. To reset the home position back to the default, you're going to press Maint for maintenance. That gives the display here Maint menu. You're going to press down arrow once to scroll down to option 1, Restore Home. This one does break the question mark rule. There is no question mark on the screen, but this one time, you'll press the Go button to select that menu option. So again, the full sequence was Maint for maintenance, down arrow once, Go. Anyone need that repeated? Alright, for anyone who's going to Menlo Park, anyone along this back ruler, just see if I have a y-axis calibration here. Now, I don't know why, but on these lasers, people tend to screw with the y-axis first. So if the y-axis is okay, there's a good chance the x-axis is okay, and that might be alright with the default home position. So, go ahead and watch the pointer. We want that.
Aren't there physical limit switches that set it to home? No?
I wish I belonged to that cover.
Sorry.
It's the same for autofocus. You'd think there would be a fail-safe built in, but there's not.
Okay.
Yeah, for most of those lovely, logical safety precautions, no, they're not there.
Okay.
Yeah. Alright, so you want to see this pointer basically splitting the front edge of this ruler. I've already done the Maint down arrow. Here's the Go button. Let's see what it does. So we're off by maybe 1/100 of an inch, maybe just a little bit more, slightly too far back. Which is not going to be a problem most of the time, but if you've got vector data bordering along the top edge of your file, you're now going to be trying to cut through the ruler instead of through your workpiece. So that is a good thing to know before you start your workday. Any questions on home position?
Out of curiosity, if you're using thin material, can you use and you don't need to go straight to the edge, is there a chance that you could use the rulers to help, like, basically keep the material down and flat?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
So how did you bring it back again here? So
To set a custom?
put the pointer on and then you saw it that it's not crossing it, right? If I want to do that test.
Yeah, so you set your custom home position, and then it's that combination I just gave you, the Maint, down arrow, Go.
No. Just to make sure that this line is not hitting that edge to stay at that edge.
So let me go through the full sequence again. We're going to set a custom home position, X, Y off, Go to answer the prompt, and that's in your handout. So once I've got a custom home position locked in with the set home button, now the motors are re-engaged,
Then you set reset.
and if I want to watch it track along the back ruler, it's going to be Maint, down arrow, and Go, and that takes me back to the default home, setting the y-axis back to 0 first. Is there a way to just redo the home position to make sure it doesn't actually track along the back? Is that how you set the calibration? If the calibration's off, either set a custom home position and record it at the front desk so they know to come fix it, or if you want to fix it right now, grab Dream Coach, are. These menus are really wacky. But that'll be dream coaches.
So, based upon a 2-hour time frame that we have the machines for, how long does it take one of the dream coaches to reset the calibration?
It will depend on the day. And that's why I say if you can, just set a custom home position and go from there.
Good to know.
If you need to, you can actually set the custom home position to visually in the top left corner. And usually that will get you at least close enough.
Okay.
With the dot, right?
With the dot,
So,
yeah.
okay, great.
And
I
then you
figured
can do
that's-
test runs to make sure that it's actually tracking where it's supposed to before you do your cutting work or whatever it is, and you can test it all out.
Okay.
Yeah. One more thing on home position. I said our home position was the top left corner, right? And this dot is now a half inch further forward. Don't worry about that, it's an epilogue quirk. For the default home position only, there is a bit of pressure on this drive belt, so they made a separate resting position a half inch further forward, just to relieve the pressure on the drive belt. So all that really means is if you see that red dot a half inch out, don't worry about it. When you start your job, it is going to go back to the top left corner or thereabouts and print from there.
So if we adjust it to the top corner using the red dot and then hit home position, it's gonna then come forward half an inch anyway?
No, because that's a custom home position.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
But then we could just set it to manually just move it forward so it could just rest forward and it doesn't have pressure so we can finish getting to the
Is there
start.
is there a reason for us to do that, or is there
No,
not really?
okay, not really. And I should say this is the typical behavior. Sometimes you'll see it go all the way back to the corner. Sometimes for custom home positions, you'll see it come forward that half inch. It's not totally consistent, but that's the general pattern.
Is it okay if I close that door?
It won't help.
It won't?
It's coming up and over.
Oh, okay.
Actually, well,
No, but actually try that. It makes no difference whatsoever.
I agree.
All right, so let's talk about data types and then actually start running some jobs. We have two data types here, one for etching and one for cutting. The two data types are raster and vector. Raster data maps to etching data on the laser. Vector data maps to cutting data. So let's look at it a little broadly. First, who's got a definition for raster data? What are we talking about when we're talking about rasters?
So non-scalable essentially. So raster is going to be ultimately XY, but it's not something that you can scale from
Right.
small to big, and it keeps its resolution essentially.
It's a Cartesian coordinate, it's a grid of pixels. And if you try to scale it up, it's not going to scale very smoothly because you're just magnifying that grid shape. So of all the standard image formats, are going to be raster data, JPEGs, bitmaps, GIFs, etc., etc. I'm sure you've all taken a small JPEG from online and tried to blow it up to large size and gotten those jagged corners. That is very typical of raster data, and it's one way to identify it. Let's go to definition for vector data. What makes something vector?
I did the last one.
I don't even know how to make vector.
Isn't that what they use on the vinyl cutter?
yeah, vector graphics can be
Vector.
pretty much wherever you put the points on the computer, whatever size you make it, automatically updates them to
Right. It's mathematically defined, so it is scalable. You can think about it as lines and curves, point to point, directions, but because it's math driving it from the back end, you can scale it as big or as small as you need to, and you should get very smooth curves. My usual example is you take a quarter-inch circle that's a quarter-inch circle, blow it up to 12 inches, and you maintain not only a nice smooth outer curve, but the same line thickness you originally started with. And that's going to be a big difference from raster data. Now, the laser here, as I said, maps rasters for etching, vectors for cutting, but the vectors have one additional quirk. For the lasers, whether or not they interpret it as vector data, I think that's page 67 of your handouts.
Great.
Rules are going to apply in Illustrator. So I've got a bunch of objects comprising my canvas. The spider here is a GIF I downloaded from online, so that will always be raster data. And raster data is going to print a line at a time with etching power.
What DPI do you need?
You can specify a bunch of different things, both in the canvas and then also in the driver window. Yeah. So the text shop grouping down here, that's 3 different objects. The text itself is a JPEG, again, always raster data, printing a line at a time with etching power. Then we have 2 shapes, 2 ellipses below it. The pale yellow ellipse here, which apparently has gone in the wrong order on the object manager. Fascinating.
I'm guessing color doesn't really matter.
Color maps to grayscale. For some reason I can't select this yellow ellipse, but you get the idea.
How many levels of gray do you have? Never mind.
It gets complicated.
Yeah, don't worry.
So yeah, this blue ellipse here with the gradient, in many contexts would be considered vector data. It's mathematically defined, it's scalable. And I forgot, this is my upgraded file, so I'm not sure that yellow ellipse is there at all anymore. Oh well. For the laser though,